Okay, let's try and unpack this. I want you to picture a map of the world for a second and zoom in right into the Horn of Africa. For decades, the lines on that map have felt like they were drawn in permanent marker.
Completely permanent. Since the colonial era ended, really, we knew where Somalia was, we knew where Ethiopia was. It felt set in stone.
But then on December 26, 2025, it feels like someone just took a big red pen, uncapped it, and, well, started drawing entirely new lines.
That's a perfect way to put it. That date, December 26, 2025, is going to be one of those dates that historians circle. It's a pivot point.
Because that was the day Israel became the first UN member state to formally recognize the Republic of Somaliland.
As an independent, sovereign state, I mean, it's just a bombshell.
It's huge. And we've all seen the pictures, right? Prime Minister Netanyahu, the Somaliland president, who everyone calls
Mohammed Abdullahi, yeah.
And they're signing this joint declaration in Jerusalem. It looked on the surface like any other diplomatic photo op. Flags, suits, handshakes.
But the shockwaves from that one handshake were immediate and global.
Absolutely. Because this wasn't just a handshake, was it? This was the shattering of a consensus, a 35-year-old diplomatic consensus.
That's right. You have to remember, Somaliland declared independence from Somalia way back in 1991.
A long time ago.
A lifetime. And for 3.5 decades, the entire international community, the UN, the African Union, the US, you name it, they all basically put their fingers in their ears and said, nope, we can't hear you.
They just ignored it.
They ignored it to preserve this idea, the sanctity of existing African border.
The one Somalia policy, the domino theory, basically.
Yeah.
If one border changes, the whole continent could unravel.
Exactly. And Israel they basically drove a tank right through that policy. Which brings us to the real mission of this deep dive today. We need to figure out why.
Right.
Because this is not just about two countries becoming friends. This is, it's a global geopolitical chess game.
Right.
We're not just talking about Israel and Somaliland. We're talking about India, China, the UAE, Ethiopia.
And the security of the entire Red Sea. It's all connected.
It's all connected.
So, okay, before we get into the spy games and the potential for naval bases, and we will definitely get there. Maybe we should do a quick primer. For anyone who hasn't been obsessively following East African politics.
The good idea.
What exactly is Somaliland? Because if you just look at a standard map, it just looks like the northern part of Somalia.
It does. And that's the classic case of de jure versus de facto. So legally, according to the UN, yes, it's a region of Somalia.
That's the de jure.
That's the de jure. But on the ground, the de facto reality, it's a completely different world. Since 1991, while the rest of Somalia was tragically dealing with civil war, with warlords, piracy, al-Shabaab, Somaliland was building a state.
And when you say building a state, what does that actually mean? What does that look like on the ground?
It means functionality. It means order. They have their own currency, the Somaliland shilling. They have their own parliament, their own police force, their own military. They issue their own passports. They hold regular elections.
Which is a stark contrast.
It's a night and day contrast. The sources we're looking at all describe it as having this relative stability compared to what they call the conflict-ridden remainder of Somalia.
So functionally, it's a country. It looks like a country. It acts like a country. It just doesn't have that seat at the UN.
Functionally, yes.
Yeah.
Legally, no. Well, until December 26th. And that's the whole point. Israel's move validated that functional reality.
But in doing so, they've opened a Pandora's box.
A massive one.
And I think that gets us to the big thesis of our deep dive. The sources are calling this a strategic rewiring of the Horn of Africa. That phrase sounds intense.
It is a complete rewiring. It's like all the old circuits are being ripped out and replaced. If you look at the players involved, you see this incredible convergence of, desperate needs.
Perfect storm.
Almost a perfect storm, yeah. You have Israel, which desperately needs security against Iran. You have India, which is looking to project its power across the Indian Ocean. You have Ethiopia, a landlocked giant of 126 million people, desperate for sea access.
And you have the UAE always looking for commercial dominance.
Exactly. And all of these powerful competing interests have suddenly crashed together in this one relatively small strip of coastline in Somaliland.
Okay, so let's start with that first piece of the puzzle then, Israel. Why does Israel care so much about Somaliland? It's 460 miles of coastline, yes, but why is this a top priority for Jerusalem right now?
In a word, security. But more specifically, it's about countering a concept that Israeli strategists are obsessed with, strategic encirclement.
Strategic encirclement.
Yeah. You have to rewind to June 2025. There was that direct military confrontation between Israel and Iran.
Right.
That conflict showed Israel something that truly terrified them. Tehran is physically moving closer. Iran has been methodically establishing footholds at all these regional choke points, trying to build what they call a ring of fire around Israel.
So Israel feels squeezed. They feel like the walls are closing in.
Precisely. And in that context, Somaliland is the pressure release valve. Look where it is on the map. It sits right on the Gulf of Aden.
Adjacent to the Bab el-Mandeb Strait.
Which is everything. That strait is one of the most critical maritime choke points on the entire planet. Millions of barrels of oil, almost all the goods from Asia to Europe, it all goes through that narrow little channel.
So if Iran, or its proxies like the Houthis, can control that,
they can choke off global trade, and more to the point, they can cut off Israel's economic lifeline at will.
Okay, so this is a major strategic play. But what does it look like? Is Israel planning to send thousands of troops? Are we going to see Israeli tanks rolling through the streets of Hargeisa?
No, and that's a really, really crucial distinction. The sources are very clear on this. Israel isn't planning a heavy boots-on-the-ground deployment.
They're not looking to occupy?
Not at all. They're looking for what the military calls ISR dominance.
ISR. Break that down for us.
Intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. Think of it as the eyes of the operation. Israel sees itself as a strategic enabler. They provide the digital infrastructure, the high-tech sensors, the satellite capabilities, the cyber intelligence, everything needed to monitor every single thing that moves in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden.
So they want to turn Somaliland into a massive listening post.
A listening post to watch Iran and, of course, the Houthis in Yemen. It's less about physical muscle and more about building a complete information nervous system.
Being able to see and hear everything.
Exactly. Information dominance is the weapon here. But, and this is where the plot really thickens, Israel isn't doing this alone.
Oh.
There's another major player involved, one that I think is going to surprise a lot of people.
Okay.
India.
India. You're right. That is surprising. I mean, we usually talk about the U.S., China, Russia, maybe the EU in this context. Since when is India a major power broker in the Horn of Africa?
This is one of the most significant and I think underreported geopolitical shifts of the last 5 years. We tend to think of the Middle East and Africa as this playground for the old Cold War superpowers.
Right.
But India has entered the chat in a very big way. They've rolled out this new, very assertive foreign policy doctrine that they call maritime statecraft.
Maritime statecraft. It sounds very grand. What does it mean in practice?
It's anchored in policies with these acronyms like SAGAR, which stands for Security and Growth for All in the region, and another one called MASAGAR. But what it boils down to is this. New Delhi has realized that if it wants to be a true global superpower, it can't just look inward to its own continent.
It has to look outward.
It has to control the Indian Ocean, and the western edge of the Indian Ocean is, of course, the coast of Africa.
So how do Israel and India work together here? Are they competitors? Are they bumping into each other in this new space?
No, and that's the genius of it from their perspective. It's a synergy. It's a division of labor, as one of the sources puts it.
A division of labor.
Well,
So
think of it this way. India brings the soft power. It has legitimacy in the global south, in the non-aligned world, that Israel simply does not have.
a better brand, essentially.
A much better brand. So India provides the physical infrastructure projects, the training for local forces, the capacity building. They're the friendly face of development and investment.
Okay, so that's India's role, and Israel.
Israel brings the hard edge, the security architecture, the missile defense technology, the advanced intelligence gathering platforms. Together, what they're trying to do is create a viable, attractive alternative to China.
Ah, there it is, the China factor. The Belt and Road Initiative is always the elephant in the room.
Always.
Yeah.
And the narrative this new India-Israel alliance is pushing is very, very specific.
Yeah.
They argue that the Chinese model, the BRI model, creates debt and dependency.
Debt trap diplomacy.
That's the term. It's centralized control from Beijing. They build the port, but they own the port, and you owe them billions of dollars.
Right.
The India-Israel model, according to our sources, proposes something different: resilience and redundancy. They claim they're empowering local capabilities, building local expertise, rather than just owning all the critical assets themselves.
So Somaliland is basically a test case, a petri dish for this new model of influence.
A laboratory of informal order is the phrase one analyst used, and I think it's perfect. They're testing a hypothesis.
Which is?
Can you build stability and prosperity through functional partnerships,
Yeah.
business, tech, security, without waiting for the slow, bureaucratic, often paralyzed machinery of the United Nations to give its official stamp of approval?
That is a fascinating and, frankly, a disruptive experiment. But we can't talk about the Horn of Africa without talking about the literal giant in the room, Ethiopia.
The sleeping giant that just woke up and is banging on the door
Yeah.
loudly.
Right. We're talking about 126 million people, a huge, fast-growing economy. But it has one massive existential geographical problem.
It's landlocked.
Completely.
It is the most populous landlocked state in the entire world, and you have to just stop and think about the logistical nightmare that creates. If you're Ethiopia and you want to export your coffee, your biggest export, or import medicine or fuel.
You have to go through someone else's territory. You have to pay someone else's fees.
And right now, it relies almost entirely on one single neighbor, Djibouti, for over 95% of its port access.
That sounds incredibly expensive and very, very risky.
It costs them about $1.5 billion annually, just in port fees.
Wow.
That's a huge chunk of their GDP just handed over for the right to use a port. But it's not even just about the money, it's the strategic vulnerability.
Because Djibouti is
Heavily influenced by China. China has its only overseas military base right there in Djibouti. So from Addis Ababa's perspective, they feel trapped. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has been extremely vocal about this. He frames Red Sea access as a matter of national survival. He even calls it correcting a historical imbalance.
So enter Somaliland.
Enter the port of Berbera. This is the economic engine that makes this entire rewiring project go. It's a straight-up port for recognition swap.
Which we saw the beginnings of with that MOU in January 2024.
Exactly. Ethiopia signs a memorandum of understanding to recognize Somaliland. And in exchange, they get a guaranteed stake in the port of Berbera and access to the sea. Israel's formal recognition just poured fuel on that fire and made it official.
And this isn't just a paper agreement, right? I was reading about a major infrastructure project, a railway.
Oh, yeah, this is real steel and concrete. A massive project. A $1.58 billion standard gauge railway that will link Ethiopia's industrial heartland directly to Berbera.
Creating a brand new trade corridor.
A new economic artery that bypasses Djibouti completely. It's strategic redundancy. It diversifies risk for Ethiopia and all its allies.
And I noticed another player lurking in the background of the Berbera deal. It feels like every time you look at a port in this region, their name pops up, the UAE.
You absolutely cannot ignore the United Arab Emirates here. DP World, the UAE's state-owned logistics giant, already manages the port of Berbera. They hold a 65% stake.
They're the majority owner.
And they are pouring hundreds of millions of dollars into expanding it. So you see how all the pieces lock together now?
It's starting to become clear, yeah.
Israel wants security, India wants influence, Ethiopia wants sea access, and the UAE wants commercial dominance. They all need Somaliland to succeed, each for their own individual, self-interested reasons.
It seems like a win-win-win-win. I mean, on paper, it makes perfect logical sense. But this is the Horn of Africa. Nothing is ever that simple. There has to be a catch.
Oh, there is a massive catch. In fact, there are several. This isn't just a diplomatic handshake. So it's like poking a hornet's nest with a very short stick. Which brings us right into Section 3 of our deep dive, the security nightmare.
Okay, lay it on me. What are the real risks here? Because you don't just redraw a map in one of the world's most vulnerable regions without upsetting the neighbors.
Let's start with the hard military dimension. We talked about Israel's eyes in the sky, the sensors and the intel, but the sources we're looking at mention that discussions are, and I'm quoting, on the table, for an actual Israeli military base.
A physical base, like with fences and flags and soldiers. Where?
The rumors are pointing to somewhere on the coast of Somaliland, or possibly even on a province called Zukor Island.
Zukor Island. That's Yemeni territory, isn't it?
It is, technically, but it's seen as part of this wider anti-Houthi island chain strategy in the southern Red Sea. But look, whether it's a full-fledged base or just a small, discreet intelligence outpost, the reaction has been explosive.
From the Houthis, I imagine.
Immediately. The leader of the Houthi rebels in Yemen has officially, publicly declared that any Israeli presence in Somaliland will be considered a military target.
And we know from the past year that the Houthis aren't just making idle threats. They have the drones, they have the anti-ship missiles. They've effectively been able to shut down large parts of Red Sea shipping.
They've proven their capability. But here's where it gets really scary. This is the detail that keeps intelligence analysts up at night. The sources indicate a growing, let's call it a black market collaboration between the Houthis in Yemen and al-Shabaab in Somalia.
Wait, hold on a second. Pause there. Those two groups are working together. I mean, ideologically, they should be mortal enemies. The Houthis are Shia. They're backed by Iran. Al-Shabaab is a hardline Sunni group aligned with al-Qaeda.
You're absolutely right. In a theology seminar, they would hate each other, but on the battlefield, when they have a shared enemy, the old saying applies, the enemy of my enemy is my friend.
So what does this collaboration look like?
The sources say it's a trade. The Houthis provide their expertise and their technology drones, IEDs, advanced missile components. In return, al-Shabaab, which controls stretches of the Somali coastline, provides coastal intelligence, logistics, and safe havens for smuggling.
So let me get this straight. In an effort to secure the Red Sea against the Houthis, Israel's actions might have inadvertently pushed the Houthis and al-Shabaab closer together.
That is the profound risk. It's a classic case of unintended consequences, a strategic blowback. And for al-Shabaab, this is a propaganda gift from heaven.
I can only imagine. The Zionist entity is invading Somaliland. I mean, the recruitment posters write themselves.
That's exactly the narrative. They are branding the leaders of Somaliland as apostate puppets of a Zionist crusader project. This is an incredibly potent propaganda tool.
And the fear is what?
The fear is that this broadens al-Shabaab's appeal beyond its usual base. Suddenly, they're not just, a terrorist group fighting the Somali government. They can rebrand themselves as the true defenders of Somali sovereignty and of Islam against foreign invaders.
That is terrifying. It gives them a kind of legitimacy they haven't had in years.
Yeah.
But what about inside Somaliland itself? We've been talking about how stable it is, but is everyone there on board with this Israel deal?
Not at all. And that's a crucial point. Somaliland is not a monolith. We tend to simplify these places, but there are deep historic clan tensions just below the surface.
Right.
In the east, for example, you have the Dolbahante clan. They've established their own administration, the northeastern state, and they want to be part of Somalia, not an independent Somaliland.
And in the west?
In the west, you have the Adal State movement, which also opposes independence. These groups are already deeply skeptical of the central government in Hargeisa. This deal with Israel just gives them more ammunition.
And I read something really specific and kind of wild in the notes about protests in a city called Barama.
Yes. There were rumors, and I have to stress, officials have denied this, flat out denied it, but rumors began to circulate that Israel's plan included resettling displaced Palestinians from Gaza to Somaliland.
Whoa. That sounds like a deliberate piece of disinformation.
It almost certainly is, but in a volatile, information-poor environment, rumors can be just as dangerous as facts. Perception creates reality, and protests erupted in Barama over this.
So you have this paradox. Israel is rewarding Somaliland for its stability.
But the very act of recognition might be the thing that destabilizes it. It's pouring fuel on all these internal fractures that were always there, just dormant.
So we have external threats from the Houthis, we have a re-energized internal threat from al-Shabaab, and now we have growing domestic unrest. But we still have to talk about the neighbors, the actual state actors. This brings us to the geopolitical backlash.
Which the sources are framing as this epic clash between two competing blocs, two axes.
The axis of secession versus the axis of sovereignty.
Exactly.
Let's break that down. Who is in the so-called axis of secession?
That's the label critics, particularly in sources like Al Jazeera opinion pieces, are using for Israel and the UAE.
And what's the argument?
The argument is that Israel and the UAE are pursuing a deliberate strategy of weakening central governments. They look at fragile, war-torn states like Somalia, Sudan, and Yemen, and they bypass the official capital city to cut deals directly with breakaway regions on the coast.
It's a strategy of exploiting fragility.
Precisely. They see it as a strategy of fragmentation. Create small, compliant client states that will give you what you want. Ports, military bases, strategic access. Without the headache of dealing with a messy, complicated central government in Mogadishu or Khartoum.
Okay, so that's one side. What about the axis of sovereignty? Who's pushing back?
Well, obviously Somalia is furious. Mogadishu called the recognition a naked invasion. They immediately annulled their security pacts with the UAE, expelled Emirati diplomats. They're on a war footing, diplomatically speaking.
But they're not alone in this.
No. A counterblock is forming, and it's a powerful one. Egypt, Turkey, and to some extent, Saudi Arabia.
Okay, Egypt, I get. This has to be about the Nile Dam dispute with Ethiopia.
Right. For Cairo, it's existential. Ethiopia is building the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, which Egypt fears will threaten its water supply from the Nile. So it's geopolitics 101 if Ethiopia is friends with Somaliland and Israel.
That Egypt is automatically an adversary of Somaliland and Israel, the enemy of my enemy.
Exactly. Egypt has reportedly already deployed troops to Somalia to train the Somali army and is providing military hardware to Mogadishu. It's a direct countermove against Ethiopia.
And what about Turkey's interest?
Turkey has invested billions of dollars in Somalia proper. They run the Mogadishu airport and seaport. They train the Somali army. They've built hospitals. They see Somalia as a key pillar of their influence in Africa.
So they see Somaliland's pivot to the UAE and Israel as a direct threat.
A direct threat to their investment and their influence. They see it as their rivals poaching on what they consider their turf.
This neighborhood is getting incredibly crowded and dangerous.
Very. And then there's the Sudan connection, which is where the web gets really sticky and complicated.
Go on.
We've established the UAE is backing Somaliland, right? But at the same time, multiple sources allege that the UAE is using the Bosaso airport, which is in Puntland, a region of Somalia, to covertly supply weapons to the RSF in Sudan.
The RSF? The Rapid Support Forces, the ones fighting the Sudanese army in the Civil War.
The very same. So you have this bizarre contradiction. The UAE is publicly supporting stability in Somaliland for trade and commerce,
while allegedly fueling instability and a brutal civil war in Sudan, just a few hundred miles away, using Somali territory for logistics.
It puts the UAE in a very complex, some would say duplicitous position. They're playing multiple chessboards at once, and not all the moves seem to align.
It really does sound like a multi-level proxy war on steroids. Everyone is fighting everyone else but through someone else.
That is a pretty accurate description, and the stakes here are incredibly high because this isn't just about regional politics anymore, it's about precedent.
Which brings us to our final section, the implications.
Yeah.
Why is the rest of the African continent so terrified of this one diplomatic move?
It comes down to a legal principle with a very fancy name, uti possidetis.
Uti possidetis. Sounds like a spell from Harry Potter?
It does, doesn't it? It's actually Latin, and it roughly means as you possess. It's the foundational, almost sacred rule of post-colonial Africa. You keep the borders you inherited from the colonizers. Full stop. Even if they don't make any sense, ethnically or geographically. Even if they're just straight lines drawn with a ruler in London or Paris, you do not touch them.
Because if you start redrawing one border,
the whole map could unravel. That's the existential fear. If Somaliland gets recognition, then what about the Tigray region in Ethiopia? What about Biafra in Nigeria? What about Cabinda in Angola? The African Union is terrified that this opens Pandora's box.
It challenges the very idea of the modern African state.
The entire post-colonial state system. If Somaliland succeeds, it proves that borders can be changed through de facto control, not just by UN resolutions.
So where is the United States in all of this? Usually they're the ones trying to act as the referee, blowing the whistle.
The U.S. is in a very, very awkward position here. When this came before the UN Security Council, almost every country denounced Israel's move. But the U.S. stood alone in defending Israel's right to do it. But, and this is the critical part, Washington itself has not recognized Somaliland.
So they're trying to have it both ways, straddling the fence. We support your right to do it, but we aren't doing it ourselves.
They're hedging their bets, but there's a lot of speculation in the sources that Somaliland is playing a longer game. They're hoping that a potential Trump administration might follow Israel's lead.
What's the logic there?
The logic is that Trump might see recognizing Somaliland as a cheap, transactional way to counter China's influence in Djibouti without spending a lot of American money or deploying American troops. It fits that America First transactional model of diplomacy.
Which brings it all back to the great power competition between the U.S. and China. But while all these elephants are fighting, the grass gets trampled. We have to talk about the human cost.
We absolutely must. It's so easy to get lost in the arrows on the map and the strategic theories and forget the people living there. This entire region is already suffering catastrophically.
I mean, the numbers are staggering.
They are. Sudan is already experiencing famine conditions. Across the wider region, something like 24 million people are facing acute food insecurity. So when you turn this region into a chessboard, when you turn humanitarian corridors into front lines for geopolitical rivalry, Real people starve to death.
Are we seeing that happen already as a result of this?
We are. Humanitarian convoys are already stalling because of these new tensions. Aid organizations can't move freely when there are troops mobilizing and militias arming up. Geopolitics is complicating the basic act of survival for millions.
It's an incredibly sobering reality, and it means that Israel and India are making a very cold, hard calculation here.
They absolutely are. They're making a bet. A huge one.
Yeah.
They are betting that these durable networks of influence built on trade, technology, and security matter more in the long run than UN consensus. They're betting on functional sovereignty.
The idea that if you build the railway and the port and the security grid, the formal diplomatic recognition will eventually just have to follow the reality on the ground.
That's the bet. But the risk, the catastrophic risk, is what one of the sources calls a catastrophic spiral.
A spiral? How?
A spiral where Somalia decides it cannot let this stand and militarily contests the borders. Somalia attacks Somaliland to prevent secession. Ethiopia then intervenes to protect its brand new port and railway. Then Egypt intervenes to counter Ethiopia. And suddenly, the Red Sea isn't a trade route anymore.
A full-blown war zone.
Our regional war zone involving half a dozen outside powers.
Okay, let's step back for a second and look at the big picture. We started this whole deep dive with a photo op in Jerusalem, a handshake. And we've ended up with the very real possibility of a regional war.
That is the scale of what we are discussing. We've moved from a diplomatic signing ceremony to a potential naval base on the Gulf of Aden. The Horn of Africa has now become the primary stage, the main theater, for a contest between what you could call the old order.
The old order being territorial integrity, UN consensus, sticking to the lines on the map.
Right. And a new order.
Which is all about strategic alliances, flexibility, and de facto reality. It's about, if it works like a country, maybe we should just treat it like a country.
Exactly. It's a clash of political philosophies as much as it's a clash of armies.
So, after all that, what does this mean for you, the listener? Why should someone in Ohio or Manchester care if some lines are being redrawn in East Africa?
Because the Red Sea is the jugular vein of the global economy. If that choke point closes down because of a war, prices for everything go up everywhere. Energy, food, the phone in your pocket, the clothes you're wearing, your Amazon package, your tank of gas. It is all directly linked to the stability of that narrow strait.
And beyond the economics.
Beyond that, it's because this is a test case. If this axis of secession model works here, if it's successful, you can bet we're going to see it applied elsewhere in the world. It fundamentally challenges how we've defined what a country is for the last 75 years.
It's a brave new world, or maybe a very scary new world.
Maybe a bit of both.
I want to leave us, and you, with one final provocative thought that's been nagging at me through this whole discussion.
Okay.
Israel's recognition of Somaliland was meant to be this masterstroke of strategy, right? Secure the Red Sea, counter the Houthis, outflank Iran. But by inflaming Somali nationalism, by handing a group like al-Shabaab the perfect unifying narrative, could this grand strategy actually backfire?
Jared, that is the ultimate terrifying irony, isn't it? That in trying to defeat one set of extremists, they may have ended up empowering another. Is this grand rewiring of the region actually a short circuit waiting to happen?
That is the question we will be watching in the months and years to come.
It certainly is.
The key takeaway: watch the ports, not just the politicians. Thanks for diving deep with us today.
It's a pleasure.